Okay, next we have the FY20 budget priorities, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
We're back on schedule. Nice job, Karen. Reports from this stuff. How did this happen that this is so easy to read?
I know, huh? See?
On the road to awesome.
On the road to awesome.
We're there.
Here we are. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones for the agenda item, the state fiscal year 2020 budget proposal. Respectfully request that the board members orient themselves to the attachment in board docs. This is a product of last month's finalization of your proposal that has gone forward by way of the Budgetary Procedures Act to the governor's office. Chair Huntsman, Superintendent Dixon, and I met with the governor and his staff yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, to go over the request. I'd like to just cover four. Well, at the end of this agenda item, I'd like to respectfully request that we come away with four particular aspects of the proposal. I just want to go over it with you one time. So first of the four is just to review everything with you, just kind of at a high level. You'll see that we followed your guidance in the process that we adopted a year ago, a year before this, where we categorized the requests. The first category being specific to growth and whatever value of the WPU you want to propose. So those are articulated or captured in Category A, growth in the WPU. Category B is basically what we receive by way of other entities. I know perhaps the word stakeholder isn't the right word, but from the field, proposals that are gathered is by way of the JLC process. And I will say that the USBA meetings I've attended and that others have attended, Superintendent Dixon, Patty, or Deputy Superintendent Norman and Stallings, we pretty much mirror the proposals of what are coming from the field, especially with the to from necessarily, or NES, and then the additional ones, school nurses, certified teacher librarians, and University of Utah Reading Clinic are basically board member or other stakeholder proposals that have come by way of the process to you. Within Category B, which is kind of a new process, within the process that we adopted, is where we request for conversion of, say, one-time funding to ongoing. So that was specific to the Learn platform and the competency-based grants. Then Category C is the USDB funding. I do need to advise you, as I've articulated before, we don't necessarily have to do a business case to the governor's office as a requirement of the Budgetary Procedures Act, because there's another law that dictates that each year we'll do the calculation and see where the USDB steps and lanes lands. Initially, the calculation was 2.2 million, but I've been advised as of today, and we can further expand on this tomorrow with USDB when they meet with you. It's around 2 million now. The adjustment is about 2 million, so a little bit lower. It is an ongoing process, and it's great synchronization between your staff here, your finance staff here, and the finance staff within USDB and Superintendent Coleman. Again, there might be a change to the LEA opt-out funding. Right now, we're holding at 1.5 million, but I'll defer to Superintendent Coleman and Carl Empey, his finance director, to provide any updates on anything at all in Category C, especially as it pertains to the other two, the USIMAC sustainability and LEA opt-out funding. Category D yes, I'm sorry. Okay.
Board Member Cannon, do you mind using your microphone? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Go ahead, Board Member Cannon, ask your question.
Oh, would you just mind giving us a little more detail
Sure.
about what you mean by LEA opt-out funding
Sure.
regarding the USDB budget?
So there's in code, there's basically what amounts to it's called the 3% rule, and basically USDB or by way of contractual agreements with certain school districts, and I'll defer to Superintendent Coleman to provide more details on this to you tomorrow during his, so I don't want to take all of his input on this. But basically what they're proposing is that, right now the process is we enter into contractual agreements with the districts to provide, services to them, instructional, translation, all those types of things. What this will do is it basically allows for funding to go to USDB to continue to provide those services, but then it frees up potentially, I'll use words like potentially, estimated, things like that until you hear more from Superintendent Coleman and we gather momentum going into the session. But it potentially frees up funding at the LEA level. Does that make sense? Because they're paying USDB out of their funds, WPU funds potentially. I'm not sure about the specificity of where exactly districts pay for that, but what this would potentially do is enable them to free up that money. USDB gets funded to do this, and we continue to serve the kids. So that's where we're headed with this one. But I'll defer to Superintendent Coleman to expand on this tomorrow during their budget update.
Quite understand, how is it Canyons and Washington school districts are opting out?
Of the 3%, if you like, I can send you the code that dictates this. I'll send you the code that establishes that 3% rule. Natalie, if you have anything to add to that, we'll send you that. I think that would probably, I'll do it for the whole board ahead of the meeting tomorrow with USDB. I think that'll really help clarify things. Then you understand what they're opting out of. It's not opt out of tests or things like that. It's opting out of that code on that 3% criteria, okay? So I'll send that to the board following this presentation. Then Category D is the Utah School Information Management System. We are going to further develop that with the Finance Committee. It's an ongoing agenda item within the Finance Committee. And then tomorrow, as part of the study session, we'll further develop the School Land Trust section budget request. Now, you might say, well, why just 60,000? Why can't you find that? Or, just solve that problem internally? Well, that money has to come from the state land trust source, and so that this would likely require a legislative change if we get to that point in the legislative session. I'll develop that more with the board tomorrow. What has developed, so then you go to the bottom, so, we say the total ask for 2020 is the 357. As part of the advocacy committee, the calculations, they're great coordination with the LEAs or the stakeholders or members of that committee. So I'm going to take you back up to category B, the very first LEA proposal, or it's identified as a proposal of the Safe and Healthy Schools. So you see the total amount there, and then you see an ongoing and one time that makes up that total amount. So now I'm going to take you back down to the bottom. And so the total ask for 2020 would be the 357. And then it was advised to us initially when we were calculating this that we'd ask for the amounts that you see in category B in the first line. And then we would subsequently, or identify this year that in subsequent years, we request 33 million over a 3-year period, state fiscal year 21, 22, 23, for 99 million. So Chair, if possible, what I would highly recommend we do at this point is we go ahead and if the board would make a motion or somebody would make a motion and second the motion to actually just make the total request for state fiscal year 2020, the total of 456,719, which would mean that we're rolling up basically to 99 million. We're making the 100 million part of 2020 to allow us to do that, because anytime even if it's one-time funding, it's typically non-lapsing. Am I right on that, Natalie? I think we do that. So we just want to clean that up, but I really do feel that we probably need a motion and approval of the board to do that, since last month your direction was to do it this way, and on my advice, but obviously throughout this process some things change. And I think based on what I'm experiencing and seeing from the meetings I've been in, I really think it'd be productive for us just to go ahead and approach it from the aspect of a total request of 456,719, rather than breaking out that, hey, in subsequent years, we're going to request 33 million. for that. So Chair, subject to your direction?
Can I ask I'd like to ask a clarifying
Sure,
question.
sure.
So this 99 million that's down at the bottom
Yes.
is over 3 years from one-time funds?
Yes.
So it's requesting 33 million from one-time funds in the next fiscal year, the
Yeah,
next fiscal
right,
year, the next
right.
fiscal
So
year.
rather than do that, we just want to try to get all of it from one-time funds this year. So basically, if you go back up to category B, rather than the one-time amount being roughly, well, the 3639, we'd add 99 million to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, because of the Budgetary Procedures Act, because you had adopted this proposal last month, I'm asking for a regulatory type change to it by way of motion and approval of the motion, if possible.
So is there a board member who would like to make that motion?
Do I need to? Okay, I'm going into my Jedi mind tricks. This is a really good idea. So, yeah, it is. Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Are there any
It's not
questions from board members for clarification on this topic?
Yeah, go ahead.
Board Member Lear?
Restate what you think
Yeah.
a good board motion would be
Sure.
along those lines,
A good board motion would be,
not just a regular.
I recommend that the previous request for $99 million of one-time funding outside of state fiscal year 2020 be remanded to be inclusive of the state fiscal year 2020 budget proposal.
There you go.
You didn't want to.
Second.
Sorry, I'm writing. Okay.
I really like
So-
Robert's rules, not Scott's rules. Robert's
So
rules.
I'll restate the motion. You can tell me if
Thank
it's
you.
correct. So
Okay.
the motion before us is to move the 99 million for school safety over 3 years at the bottom up to category B, one-time funding request to add the 99 million onto the safe and healthy schools one-time funding request. So that total would be
One-
whatever
99
million.
plus 30, 3649, yes.
And you have to do math.
100, roughly 130 million of one-time money.
Okay.
Hey, is there any discussion to that motion? Do you need it restated? So the motion was made by Board Member Lear,
Yes.
second
loosely
by
speaking.
Board Member Nielsen. Did I get that right?
Great.
No? Was I totally off? Michelle seconded it? It was this side of the room.
Yeah.
Oh, Michelle moved it. Who seconded it?
Yeah.
Belknap seconded it. Thank you.
And I can be Michelle. We're fun.
Okay, is there any further discussion to that motion? Board Member Lear, your light is still on. Are you
Oh,
wanting to
no,
speak to
I'm-
that? Okay, okay. Okay, seeing no discussion, then the motion before us is to move the 99 million of one-time funding to be included into the fiscal year 2020 FY budget proposal under safe and healthy schools, the one-time ask. Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Chair, two more pieces for this particular agenda item today in the process. I'd be remiss if I didn't also advise the board that the process also allows for, and you'll see it in the next agenda item when Deputy Superintendent Stallings comes forward, is as we identify more legislative requests so what I really want to talk about is a program related to dyslexia. That came up after the budget proposal was presented. If we need more questions on that, my understanding is Deputy Stallings has the form filled out for that, right? That came from teaching and learning. So what I'm saying here is that there's this process and this agenda item, but we are one team, and it's conducive to the productivity that you're going to see that Deputy Stallings presents in the next item. Okay, so I just, want to make sure you make your proposal, but, other committees meet, say like ed interim. So if you hear like, proposals about, potential legislation and all that, that's them. It's not the staff or anything like that. But our job, by way of this process that Angie will speak to here on the next agenda item, is all inclusive, and we're always making sure that as staff we're informing you of what's going on your left and right, in addition to your adherence to the Budgetary Procedures Act. So there is that part. The last piece, or are there any questions or concerns before I get to the last piece, and then subject to the chair's direction, go ahead and defer to Angie for the next agenda item? Are there any questions?
There are no lights on, so
Okay,
proceed.
so the last takeaway from this is it's productive of us to start to think about prioritization. We're going through the process now of where revenue is coming in. We're going to go through the common data committee process has already started right now, at least. So, yeah, and so we don't necessarily have to do it this month. But what I'd ask is maybe perhaps board members start to consider within the budget proposal itself right now what you would want to see prioritized. Once, we get clear definition of what revenue is available to you. We end up doing it anyway as part of the legislative session, but it's never too early for us to start considering prioritization of the different requests within the categories starting this month. It's been very productive to take this methodology. As you've seen, we've exponentially increased funding, not just us, the USBE, but in close partnerships and cooperation with our LEAs and their representatives. Funding is increased exponentially. So we want to. It's a best practice. We want to start to get come together as far as when we're asked what our priorities are. What are those priorities? So staff can articulate your direction when we're in meetings separate from you with the board, but we're always together. We might be separate from you in that meeting, but we're always together as far as what your prioritizations are for funding. If you want to take some time and discuss that now, we do it, but what I would ask is that between now and the December meeting, as this is a perpetual item, subject to any other changes to the board, is that we start at the December meeting and ensuring that we're getting a good idea on what your priorities are. Because I think by that time, and Natalie might elbow me on this one, we'll be able to have a little bit more detail on where the CDC is at.
By December, it'll be done in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. So by December, the timing should be good. And so we'd share that information with you, and then that should help you start to look at prioritizations of these different asks. Okay?
Are there
Any
any board
questions,
members
Commissioner?
that have any questions or things that like to move forward? Okay.
Okay.
then Carry
Thank
on.
you.
Thank you. So our next legislative, yep. So